Well, this is Dateline News and Conversation. Um, the topic tonight is peace, and there's an urgent need for peace because with the wars that are seem to be escalating, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East, with the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran. Um, who knows whether Iran is nuclear armed? But the danger for a nuclear exchange is higher now than it's really ever been since the 13 days in October 1962, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I have felt uh, the danger and the fear that we were extremely close to nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And that's the reason for my first trip to Russia in 2016, to find out as much as I could about Russia, to find out the truth. Uh, and then I finished that film, which I entitled in 2016 30 Seconds to Midnight. I didn't believe the Bureau of Atomic Scientists, they had it around 3.5 minutes. And I felt back then in 2016, um, 10 years ago now, we were 30 seconds. Were I to publish that film today, I would have to call it The Final Countdown. Five, four, three, dot, dot, dot. I think we're that close. Now, for that reason, my guest tonight got this idea that he was going to write a letter to Archbishop Webster, um, a real peace activist and anti nuclear activist, in the hopes that the Archbishop could convey this letter to Pope Leo, the American Pope, who has also been calling for peace and the end to wars. Uh, my guest tonight, he's become a good friend, he's a regular, Jack Gilroy. Jack, welcome back to the show.
Pleased to be with you, Regis.
Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction to this appeal letter. I want you to tell me um, how, when, and why you came up with this idea. And then I'll have several more questions to ask you about that. But how, when, and why were you motivated to come up with this?
Well, I'm old enough, Regis, to remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I was just a boy of 10 at the time, and I had really no compassion. I was not taught any sort of reverence or compassion for people. Before the nuclear weapons took place, I often read and had no real concern except that we were winning when we talked about dropping blockbusters on Europe. These were bombs, of course, where apartment buildings, houses in a whole block could be destroyed with just one bomb. And you know some of the history of that. You know the history of even Kurt Vonnegut being in the slaughterhouse, an American, young man who was captured by the Germans, and during the bombing of Dresden, changed his way, his life, and ended up writing many novels in reference to the need for people to be kind to each other. That sort of kindness, I think, gradually for me came about through a number of factors that I won't get into now, but they were individuals who impressed me over the years that something was very, very dangerous. One of those individuals was a fellow by the name of Richard McSorley. Richard McSorley was a Jesuit at the University of Scranton, and in 1960 and 1959 and 60, I had him as a teacher, and he pretty much became a mentor. We both left in 1960. I graduated simply with a bachelor's degree at the time from the University of Scranton. And Richard McSorley went on to Georgetown, where he became the tennis coach of Jackie Kennedy and the spiritual advisor of both Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy. I think what remains from that is that he was so well accepted by the Kennedy family that when John F. Kennedy was assassinated November 22nd of 1963, just 2 days later, the New York Daily News had a full page photo of Richard McSorley with John Kennedy and Carolyn Kennedy at his hand. He was the trusted spiritual advisor for both families. Previous to that, 5 months before that, in June 10th of 1963, you remember that at American University, John F. Kennedy made what some people say was the greatest speech of the 20th century. And check it out. It really was amazing, especially for the fact that he is the only president that we know of who called for total disarmament. That, of course, sent shockwaves through the American Merchants of Death system, the whole system of war making that had become, what Eisenhower, the general, of course, of U.S. forces in Europe, the president, two-term president, who said going in as president with his Iron Cross speech in 1953 and going out with his speech in 1961 when he said, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." He knew it was already in place, but beware of it, do something about it. Well, Kennedy was trying to do something about it, and he was a strong president against the generals. He knew he made a mistake with the Bay of, with Eisenhower was a bit behind that, the CIA debacle, the Bay of Pigs debacle, and that really set his resolve that he wasn't going to be upset by some group of generals, whether it was LeMay or any of the other group. And so he gave that powerful speech in June of 63, and 5 months after that, of course, he was assassinated. And but we do know that after his assassination, that there was a peace treaty that came about, the first real, actually 1963, the disarmament, the treaty that followed the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so I think I'd like to back up a bit in that particular time of 1962 to make the connection that you're pretty much directing us to, and that is, what is the relationship of 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the even greater, perhaps, crisis right now that you say is just seconds away from midnight. And a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of distinguished experts will agree with you on that point. That's how difficult it is. Well, in 1962, you remember, or some people do not remember. I remember because I was around. It was so serious with the missiles on their way to Cuba that the whole world was concerned that this was the end. This was going to be the end if the Soviets put missiles, intermediate missiles, onto the sites, the missile sites that were already prepared, and in some others in preparation could be launched against major cities in the United States. It would be thermonuclear war. Kennedy and his team pretty much drew a line in the Atlantic Ocean and said, your ships are not going to come beyond this line, or we will sink your craft and the missiles with them. Now, during that time, there were back channels going on that a lot of people were not aware of. I wasn't. When I was a teacher in a middle school, one of my students took almost a whole bottle of aspirin, and we had to have her sent to the hospital. And she said later that she didn't want to die, she wanted to burn to death. She didn't want to be incinerated. It was that kind of attitude of both children and adults. But what happened with when all of this went on with the back channels? Well, we know from history that some of the back channel stuff came out of Norman Cousins, who was a good friend of Kennedy and was the director or the publisher of the Saturday Review of Books, a well-known individual, literally at least, in literature throughout the United States. And what he was able to do was to meet with a Belgian friar who was an individual, an envoy to John the 23rd. It was Pope John the 23rd at that time, who was the leader of the Roman Catholic Church and considered to be, as any pope, sort of an international moral leader of whatever religion or no religion. So John the 23rd then was looked upon as a very important figure. And how do you get to him? Well, Cousins was able to get to Father Felix Morleon, who a Belgian friar who had access to the Pope. And they appealed to the Pope to please make an appeal to the Soviets to stop what they were doing. He got on Osservatore Romano, or actually Vatican Radio, I should say, Vatican Radio, and gave a speech that the following day, Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, had published in Pravda, the leading newspaper of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And the letter basically was an appeal by John the 23rd to the leaders of the world to listen to the cry of humanity and please stop your nuclear actions. We don't know if that was the actual reason why Khrushchev turned the ships around. There was probably multiple reasons, but he did. He turned the ships around, and the Cuban Missile Crisis came to an end. Khrushchev and the atheist, and so much opposed to the Vatican so much opposed to the Soviets, who had imprisoned cardinals and bishops and priests. It was a bad time, the Cold War, between the two. And here they became friends. They learned that they had sort of a common identity coming from relatively poor families. And now here they were as major leaders internationally. So it was 2 months after the Cuban Missile Crisis ended that that Khrushchev said to the media and to government officials that the first ray of light to end the Cuban Missile Crisis was Pope John the 23rd. So building on that, we are asking an American archbishop who is the most outspoken Catholic or any religious prelate, any religious leader in the United States on the issue of nuclear weapons, in the call to stop the madness of mutually assured destruction, which of course is what it is, either accidentally or intentionally. So we wrote a letter, and the letter asked the Archbishop to please make contact with his fellow Chicago person. Both he and the Pope are from Chicago. Please, and we don't know, by the way, whether, we do know the Pope is a White Sox fan. We don't know if, Archbishop Wester is a Cubs fan. But anyway, they are both baseball fans, if that means anything. But it does mean they're both American. They both have very strong feelings about militarism, very strong feelings about the need to follow the basic rule of Catholic social teaching, which is the dignity of every human being. We're not saying Catholics or Protestants or Jews or Muslims or atheists. We're saying every human being, right? That is what the first principle of Catholic social teaching is. So we're asking then Archbishop Wester to please make that contact with the Pope. One problem is he finally took a vacation. He's out but he'll be back in a couple of days. And his assistant has the letter and has already forwarded it to the apostolic delegate, the nuncio that we refer to, the Latin, the nuncio is an ambassador. Remember that the Vatican has 170 installations, embassies around the world, so that they are a government, a city. So we're asking that Archbishop Wester to please ask the Pope to call a summit of Xi Jinping, of Putin, of Trump, and perhaps maybe even the Secretary of the United Nations, who happens to be what I learned on online is a devout Catholic, Antonio Guterres. all of those people to come together in a neutral place, perhaps the Vatican, perhaps Vienna or Geneva, but somewhere where they can sit down and say, we've got to stop the madness. We cannot allow Poland to put nuclear missiles along the border of Russia. We cannot really allow insanity Lithuania as well to put nuclear weapons, and they're saying they want them along the border of Russia. We cannot allow Finland, which is possibly will be saying within the next few weeks they will put missiles on the border of Russia. This is why, Regis is saying this is so dangerous. This plus the possibility of nuclear war in the Middle East. As Regis just mentioned, how do we know what will happen? Iran has, years of preparation, knowing that they're going to be attacked somewhere along the line by someone out of the West. Even though they are not attacking other people, they would probably be attacked by these aggressive individuals looking to establish a foothold, a pivot fold in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, part of a long-term plan going back to Brzezinski years ago. But what do we do then? What do we do with this with the situation?
Jack, let me jump in and interrupt just for a second.
Sure.
I'd like to add to what you just said. The rhetoric about the possible use of nuclear weapons today is higher than it's ever been. The United States is the only country that has a first strike part of its nuclear doctrine. There are people in the Pentagon who believe that the United States can win a nuclear war.
Strategic, or tactical, yeah.
It's nuclear, and
Yes,
you go tactical. It's not long before it's going to go boom, full force.
Right.
The other troubling thing is, all across Europe, many of these presidents and prime ministers of country, chancellor in Germany, from the UK, from France, Germany, people in Brussels, are also talking about the use of nuclear weapons. And then, of course, Russia does not have a first strike article in their nuclear doctrine, but Putin has said, if we are attacked in our existence, even in non-conventional ways with weapons, not nuclear, we will respond with everything we have to protect our civilization. And so, on top of everything you've just said, you've got these leaders in the United States, in Europe, the Baltics, as you mentioned, Lithuania, Latvia, and even Finland and Sweden. I mean, this is complete insanity. And I just wanted to jump in because I want to make sure that people understand that this has never happened before in all of history since the first atomic bomb. And so there's that sense of urgency that you felt and many of us feel. So you came up with the idea of writing this letter to Archbishop Wester to somehow convey this to Pope Leo, the American Pope, first American Pope. How appropriate for him, unlike, I mean, I've known who all the popes are now for the last my lifetime. Nobody has been, probably has more credibility than this Pope, who's an American, who's been anti-war, who's been anti-nuclear, and who is promoting peace immediately for this insanity to stop. So you're the one that came up with the idea. Did you write the first draft? Did anybody else help with that?
I wrote the first draft, and one of our members of Pax Christi, Pax Christi, I can explain later, the peace of Christ that started by French and German people during the latter stages of World War II. But yeah, I wrote the whole letter, and then there was some criticism that it was demanding, which we didn't feel that it was demanding. But rather we were saying we respectfully ask you, will you please contact the Pope? But so we never. Rosemary Pace of Pax Christi, New York State, redid a very nice opening paragraph, which was very laudatory of the Pope. A lot of what the Pope, not the Pope, but Archbishop Wester, a lot of the very good and positive things that Archbishop Wester has done and the awards that he has received for his anti-nuclear and anti-war stance. And then I asked Ray McGovern, and Ray spent to help out with some of the chronology. Ray actually spent 27 years in the White House, starting off with JFK and ending up with Bush 1. And so Ray has a couple lines there in the second or third paragraph. But essentially, that was it. And it was the letter that I wrote, but it was with that very good help from Rosemary and very good help from Ray McGovern. In between, I also contacted James Douglas, the author of the JFK, The Unspeakable, and James Douglas also agreed that it's good to start off with a pleasant tone and congratulatory tone to the Archbishop, and to not make any demands of him. Frederick Douglass would not be happy, maybe, but nevertheless, we did that, and so it is a letter that really, if you get a chance to read it, Regis, I don't know if you will do that, but you will see that at the end, some amazing people have answered on. The director of ICAN, the International campaign against nuclear weapons, which was the Nobel Peace Prize winner just a few years ago, she signed on. We have James Douglas himself, who signed on. Ray McGovern signed on, but other very big and important names in both civic and religious situations. Some atheists, individuals such as David Swanson, who's the director of World Beyond War, Kathy Kelly, a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee on 3 different occasions, and also the Pope, the Archbishop this past year, 2026, has been selected as the Pax Christi Teacher of the Year. We have 6 other Teachers of the Year who have signed on. Individuals such as Martin Sheen, the actor, has signed on. So we could go on with various people in the numbers, but anyone can go online now and see the actual letter. They can go to the Schiller Institute where we have it posted, and you'll see this long and growing list of people asking Archbishop Wester to please be the American envoy to the American Pope to stop this horrendous situation, which is driven by, as Martin Luther King said in 1957, the greatest purveyor of violence in the whole world is my own government. That was a lot of years ago, and it hasn't changed. Maybe it can. Maybe we will find a charismatic leader out there, like James Tallarico, the Baptist, I think he's a Baptist fellow who just won in Texas, did a great upset for the United States Senate. He has a good chance of being a senator from Texas. If he doesn't make it as senator, maybe he can be the charismatic American to get out and talk about nonviolence, because that's what he's about. He says we need to end gunboat diplomacy. We have to start real diplomacy. It's not going on. So that's the core point, Regis, that we have an appeal to the Pope to take dramatic leadership, as John the 23rd did, and call for a summit between all of the major leaders.
I've had posted at the bottom of the screen below us. I don't know if you can see it. It's the internet link to the Schiller Institute directly to the letter to Archbishop John Wester to urge Pope Leo to call for a peace conference. I'm going to leave that there for a little bit more so uh,
Thanks.
people can maybe be able to jot it down or do a search uh, for the internet because it's the letter is wonderful and it's a little too long, I think, for you or I to try to read the whole thing. But I
Okay.
want to encourage people to do that. It's a very powerful letter. And the other thing I want to ask you, um, there's another channel that surfaced to the Pope in the person of my really good friend, Peter Kuznick. He's
Hmm.
a professor at American University in Washington. He is attending, or did last weekend, I believe, um, a very important meeting up in northern Italy when he is going to give a speech and he's going to talk about the letter that you've written. And he was hoping to meet the dean of the College of Cardinals, who was also attending that meeting. And he was going to hand that letter directly to him with the request that he get it um, to Pope Leo. So, um, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that? I mean, I know you said Archbishop Wester was on vacation, but they forwarded the letter, I guess, to the Vatican through the papal nuncio.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, this is two channels. I think that's pretty important. I mean, I want your thoughts on Peter's effort in this whole thing.
Oh, Peter's effort has been nothing short of amazing. Before I give you an update on what he's still in northern Italy and still in post conference, seminars there, and we just heard from him this morning, and I can give you that a bit of the update. I can't tell you the
Yeah,
whole story.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, well,
I
I
think our
think
viewers would like to hear it.
Yeah, and I will tell them first though that Peter, of course, went to Japan last week, to Nagasaki, before he went to northern Italy, and Rachel Clark, one of our members of Veterans for Peace, she translated. She's Japanese. She translated from the English letter to Japanese. It's been printed all over the place in the major media of Japan, and they were there in Nagasaki. The Hiroshima newspapers have printed it, uh, but but that was last week. Now this week, he's last Thursday he went to northern Italy. On Saturday, it was Saturday morning that he gave the speech, and sadly the College of Cardinals, uh, Archbishop Ray, his name is uh, a uh, Battista Ray. He was sick. He took ill, and but the institution itself, the conference leaders said not to worry. We are in close touch with him, and we will give him the letter, and we will endorse the letter. Beyond that, there are other things that developed just this morning. A call that Peter had with a couple of us, that he is able, he's for sure, pretty much for sure, that this letter very shortly will be in the hands of the Pope. And I'm not going to say exactly how that's going to happen, but you can guarantee that Peter is on to something very good. So getting the letter there is going to happen with all the various channels that we've been working on. And they won't have, of course, the updated number of people. In there's something like 40 major peace organizations that have signed on. But the fact is that as this continues to build, we will get the information to the Pope and get it obviously first to Archbishop John Wester of New Mexico, and then through the channels, through the papal nuncio, and to the Pope himself. So it's a hope. It's so difficult. Who else is doing this sort of thing? Who else is the Schiller Institute has done an amazing job of tracking down, of taking all of these names, of helping me and helping Pax Christi It's been a great solidarity action between Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace Conference in Kansas City announced the letter at their main session Saturday night at the University of Missouri. So all of this then through social media and through your good grace of your program, I think that this is it's on its way to at least be considered. And I just hope and pray that Pope, like our friend here in this illustration above me, it's the peace sowers, John and John the 23rd and John Kennedy. But even though maybe Khrushchev might not be a friend of a lot of Russians today, but his illustration should have been in the middle of that portrait as well, because it was Khrushchev and John who brought about the end of that disastrous situation known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. So now we're hoping that the American Pope will there'll be portraits of him and of Xi Jinping and even Trump if he's able to be part of it along with Putin. It's possible. They all have their individual egos and reasons to do it. The more important thing is to prevent the greatest disaster, the end of humanity. It's not an exaggeration. It's, as you say, with your film of 10 years ago, it's much worse now.
Well, I did a bit on Peter Kuznick just a few days before he went to Italy, and he talked about his plan and effort to convey that letter personally to the Dean of the College of Cardinals. In his absence, obviously the organizers have guaranteed that that letter will get to the Dean of the College of Cardinals, and hopefully he will present it to the Pope. I said in that show that I think because he's an American, I think he's getting information, I am sure, not just from the mainstream media, but from alt media. He's a young man. He's been using the computer all of his life. The internet is loaded with alternative media that they range from A to Z in terms of trying to get the truth out to as many people as possible around the world. I think it was great that Rachel Clark, who's a good friend of mine, she had a very important influence in me going to Japan, and I stayed with her on my return from one of my trips down through the Pacific. So she's been an incredible crusader for peace, for bringing awareness to, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I think that's great that it's been spread all over Japan, and probably it's gone really now all over the world. But I want to get back to Leo. Being an American, being familiar with the internet and I'm sure alternative media, and I think being the current Pope from the United States of America, the first time ever, I think probably even more so than Pope John the 23rd, who I loved, I think Pope Leo has the ability to carry this message not only to the leaders of the United States, of Russia, the other nuclear-armed countries, but to people all over the world, regardless of their religious belief. He can appeal to what you were talking about in the beginning, our humanity. It's not about religion. It's about humanity in a matter of conscience. It's a moral obligation for all people who treasure life and peace. And I think that's the majority of the people in the world. I think it's governments of the world and political leaders of the world that have taken us down this path. I don't think there's anybody better than Pope Leo to, and I hope he does say it clearly, speaking to Trump, speaking to uh, Xi Jinping, speaking to President Putin, speaking to all those countries that have nuclear weapons. I hope he is very bold and clear and not at all evasive, worrying about hurting somebody's feelings. I agree with you. This is the most urgent issue of our time. Nothing else comes close to this. Nothing. So, on the one hand, I want to thank you and make sure that people are aware that this idea came from you, um, just an ordinary American who's been a lifelong peace activist, who's walked the talk, spent time in jail um, for all of these years. Now, Jack, this is my final question on this topic of this special appeal to Pope Leo. Um, what do you think the outcome might be? What is, I mean, what kind of hope do you have? Beyond him calling this meeting, what do you
Mhm.
think might happen? Who do you think might respond? I think this has a potential to be absolutely huge. Your thoughts?
Well, I think of all the individuals, the three individuals involved, I would say that Xi Jinping is the strongest because his philosophy and the philosophy of the Chinese is not the philosophy of the West, led by the United States, the merchants of death, and the bankers of London and New York City. His philosophy is, of course, economic competition, and he leaves open the possibility, if you want to call it economic war, you can have a peaceful conflict instead of economic war. You can have an international trade, and the Chinese, of course, have thousands of years of experience versus the kids on the block, the Europeans, and of course the babies, the Americans, who don't know the importance of Chinese philosophy. That you use Confucianism, you use the friendship and kindness, the idea of using kindness. That's not to say that, of course, that all the Chinese are just totally kind people and the West not, but their philosophy is quite different. They do not have 800 military bases strung around the world. They have not attacked, and I won't give a litany of nations, but my God, it goes on and on and on. If you think of the countries that the United States in the last 60 years have invaded, it's, for me as an American, it's disgusting. But they have, and so whereas the Chinese simply have not done that. They have a base out in the Indian Ocean, right? That a naval base. That's about it. Russia has a few bases around the world, just a few. They have maybe 16 bases in their former principalities, the former republics of the old Soviet Union. But nothing. Just imagine that, where we have, in some of these bases have been hit by the Iranians, and more of them will be hit by the Iranians. So there's got to be an answer to the belief that somehow or another you can beat people down. We haven't beaten the Vietnamese down. We haven't beaten the Afghans down. We haven't beaten the Iraqis down, and we won't beat down the Iranians either. So I think you've got to say that Russia, above all, is not going to be beaten down. And as you noted, Russia may change their view versus the United States, which typically has that first strike kind of attitude that could, even an accident could bring about nuclear war. So what could happen? I'm thinking of it positively, that a peaceful meeting there may lead, of course, individuals like Mr. Trump to see that his party, the Republican Party, has almost no chance, especially now with him losing his base. His political base is going. He has one of the lowest rankings ever by all poll measures that I have been able to read. So there may be reason for him. The guy who said he was going to go into this his presidency in the war between Russia and the Ukraine, to end the situation of violence in the Middle East. He was not going to focus on war, but he was going to focus on peace. And of course, just the opposite has happened. And his base is saying, "You're wrong." Many of his base are saying, "You're wrong," and this has got to change. So I think Trump could be an important response to this. And I believe that definitely Putin would be a great help in Xi Jinping. And the world apparently is changing. Trump may not know it, but his assistants and aides are. He's just the face for the system. So if his aides and all can assist this and know that maybe this will be the saving grace, especially as the economy is going down the tubes, that you won't have to worry about oil transport, either the Suez Canal or the Straits of Malacca or the Straits of Hormuz being blocked, that free trade will go about. These money people, and their interest is unfortunately basically money. They may see an economic interest to this, and the Pope could be the arbiter of a good peace agreement.
I want to mention this about Trump and then Putin. Uh, you know, Donald Trump betrayed his MAGA followers because, as you said, he promised peace. He bragged that he brought the end to what, 6 wars, imagined wars, but he bragged about it. He wanted
Yeah.
the Peace Prize. He made such a big deal out of that. But in terms of Iran and in terms of his own legacy, by supporting this meeting, by attending it, he has an out, a safe out of Iran.
Yeah.
He somehow had this awareness, like, St. Paul falling off the horse and now becoming a Christian. Who knows what might be going through his mind, because he's desperate right now, because he knows he's losing and in Iran, and he knows he's losing all over the United States. The economy is in shambles. I read something about his approval rating was in the 20th percentile,
Mhm.
certainly the 30th. And so I think he if somebody can help him open his eyes and realize that he can save himself, he can save his legacy, he can end the war in Iran, and he could end the war in Ukraine, as he promised. It's easy for him to do, and I'm not going to go into that now. The other part of the equation is Putin. What we know about President Putin is he has consistently pleaded for dialogue, pleaded to
Mhm.
be respected,
Yeah.
pleaded for peace. My God, he wanted to be part of the EU, he wanted to be part of NATO.
Mhm.
United States rebuffed him all along the way.
Mhm.
So I have to believe that President Putin, and by the way, a very uh, devout Russian Orthodox believer, uh, I have to believe that he'd be there in no time at all. And I would bet that with his relationship with President Xi and with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong un, he could convince them to take part in this as well.
Yeah.
And then the pressure on everybody else and on Donald Trump would be enormous. So this would be my hope, Jack. The end game, the end result from your idea and your effort, that maybe the eyes of these leaders could be opened and not just call for peace, the end of the war in Ukraine and Iran, wherever else war is going on. But Jack, who knows? Finally, nuclear disarmament. This would be what I would hope might happen. Big hope. But Jack, I'm so happy to do this show with you. I'm so happy that people know who you are, what the origin of this appeal to the Pope was all about. But before we move on to another subject with the time we have left, you mentioned Pax Christi. That's Latin for the peace of Christ. Now, I would even think most Catholics don't even know what Pax Christi is today. Maybe many years ago it was more well known, but what's the origin of that? And uh, what can you tell me about uh, why it was founded, what its mission has been through all these years?
Sure. Well, people can look this up and get more, some specifics on Pax Christi. But again, as you said, peace of Christ, and it really began in 1945. The months leading to the final, move by the Russians to overthrow Berlin and the death of Hitler, etc. But the war was going on in March of 1945 when a French woman made contact with a French bishop who happened to be in a prison. The Nazis had him in prison, and a German layperson, and asked. They had a meeting, a session, asking why. A letter session to begin with, and later in person. Why is it that Christians who believe in the nonviolent Christ and basic love of your enemies are killing one another? French killing Germans, German killing French Christians. Why is that? And they called for a Peace of Christ session. Well, these meetings or organizations spread throughout France, Germany. Eventually, in post World War II, the 40s and 50s, almost every European country with a Catholic population had a Pax Christi organization. It came to the United States in 1970, and 72. My friend Richard McSorley of Georgetown University, the Jesuit, he was one of the leaders of organizing Pax Christi in the United States. So now there are 170 Pax Christi organizations worldwide, and the group that I belong to is Pax Christi USA, and more locally Pax Christi New York State. And the whole point again is to try to teach nonviolence. And we have some excellent teachers such as Emmanuel McCarthy, a Eastern Rite Catholic priest, John Deere, who's a former Jesuit, still a priest, but wasn't to be told what to do, and he now has his own peaceful organization. The, all of these people have made clear that Pax Christi is one of the better groups to approach the Archbishop of New Mexico. But we also have non-religious groups such as Veterans for Peace and the Schiller Institute. The Schiller Institute has had 166 weekly programs. That's over 3 years now, devoted each week on Friday morning to peace. And it's called the International Coalition, Peace Coalition, the International Peace Coalition. So that is in a nutshell, I guess, what Pax Christi is about. But it does try to work in solidarity with other organizations, including a very close group of people called Banned Killer Drones, which was something that Ukrainians probably would not accept because of the influence of drone warfare in the past couple of years. So these are, Pax Christi is right on top of it. We have our meeting this coming week in Fonda, New York, at the Native American shrine of Katerina Saint Kateri. And we should note that Rachel Clark this past Saturday received the award for our chapter out of 140 Veterans for Peace chapters. Our chapter was recognized as the outstanding chapter in Veterans for Peace. And it was Rachel, who is an associate member. She lives too far away from us, 5 hours, to come to our meetings, but for sure she's one of us, and she spoke last year at our Hiroshima event. So these are just some background informations of Pax Christi and Veterans for Peace, which have really come together along with the Schiller Institute, and other organizations, as you can see, are joining in the solidarity.
You mentioned Father John Deere. I had the privilege and great opportunity to film a workshop he did. God, it's probably a little more than 10 years ago 10 years ago now, at St. Francis College in Maine. And I
Mhm.
was asked by Pax Christi members if I would document that. And I published, I think it was 3 different videos in that series. Uh, but he said something at the time. Of course, he's all about nonviolence. That's
Yeah,
his whole theology and
right.
philosophy. But he said, and I titled one of those shows, "Nonviolence or Non-Existence."
Mhm.
Boy, when you think about that,
Yeah,
if we don't go the nonviolent way, there isn't going to be any human existence.
right.
Okay, um, wow, that was quite an interesting discussion. I can't thank you enough for that, Jack. You mentioned uh, Ann Wright, retired colonel. She's a very dear friend for over 10 years now. In fact, I stayed with her at her condo in Hawaii on my way back from my trip to the Marshall Islands uh, while I was researching 30 Seconds to Midnight. She's been a very dear friend and supported me over all of these years. Uh, for those that may not remember or know who she is, um, she served for 29 years in the U.S. Army in reserves and retired as a colonel. That's not the end of her story. She also was a United States diplomat for 16 years, and she served in U.S. embassies Nicaragua, Grenada, Somalia, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Sierra Leone, and Micronesia, and Afghanistan and Mongolia. This woman not only has a lot of experience, but is highly respected all over. She resigned uh, in March of 2003 in opposition to the Bush administration's war on Iraq. As you mentioned, she's a member of Veterans for Peace and is the co author of Dissent Voices of Conscience. Well, you sent me uh, this information about Anne, and she wrote a letter indicating that 19 years ago, in February of 2007, during the Bush administration, uh, she wrote an article entitled An Appeal to Conscience to Those Who Would Bomb Iran. Now, 2 decades later, 4 presidential administrations later from Obama, Trump, Biden, and Trump again, the article is virtually the same. I want you to tell me about this. Uh, she basically is appealing to the conscience of American soldiers who um, who are suffering from veterans now are suffering from PTSD, what's also called moral injury, and the suicide rate uh, is only second to the deaths of U.S. veterans. Many of those from the Afghanistan war, but the wars in Iraq and elsewhere. They can't deal as human beings with killing another human being. When they come back, they have nightmares. They're troubled by this. Not only do they demonstrate the behaviors of post traumatic stress disorder, but the moral injury that comes from doing something that is so opposite of who we are as human beings. She also challenged a Nuremberg trial about disobeying illegal orders, and that saying that I was just following orders is not an excuse, it's not an exemption from guilt. Jack, I want to pick it up from there. What are your thoughts on this? Because it's so connected to what we just finished talking about,
Mhm.
demanding peace in the world. Uh, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think what Anne is speaking to, again, as you say, is conscience. She does, as you noted, she refers in her articles that are really quite a few various journals, online journals, are picking up the article that she just wrote a couple of days ago on this whole question of following your conscience. Uh, Anne has been following her conscience, as you noted, since she in Kabul in 2003 was the first diplomat to resign his or her position. I think one other individual resigned after her somewhere. But she has stayed with us and has become a very strong part of Veterans for Peace. I met Anne personally for the first time I think it was 2011, when my play about drones, The Predator, was being done down at the Columbus Convention Center in Georgia, and it was a reading. We didn't have professional actors, and I needed someone to take the role of a United States senator. And she took it with a lot of fun. She even ad-libbed some of my lines as when we did the reading of the play, which was called The Predator. And you know what? That was the first main weapon that we had, a drone weapon, appropriately, of course, named. We graduated from the Predator to the Reaper. In my play now, the working with Zul Zolkowitz of Veterans for Peace as well. The play is Reap What You Sow, Don't Lose Heart, and that also is, of course, about drone warfare. Just two women. So Anne has seen that play. She has been in support of us over the years, but this past few months, she has moved from being in Europe to try to organize flotillas to Gaza, which she has been on several flotillas to Gaza, arrested by the Israelis, in jail, etc. But she came back feeling quite ill. She had pneumonia. She came back, as you say, she's from Honolulu. She rested up and swam and all that in Honolulu. And by gosh, there she was a couple nights ago, sending me photographs from the Veterans for Peace convention in Kansas City. And she'll probably be off before long to Europe. She doesn't hide her age. She's 80 years old now and is proud of it and is still out there acting. It's that kind of voice that's going to win over. And I hope that her name is on that letter that we just mentioned. But I don't want to mistake or say the wrong words here for what Anne wrote. And I'll take just a minute to a very important moral point that she is getting to, an appeal to Air Force, Navy, and Marine pilots. And she said, I appeal to the conscience of U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine pilots who fly the bombers and attack aircraft, and to Navy, Air Force, and Army personnel who command land and sea-based missiles, and those who plan these attacks to stop the criminal actions. She says, save your soul, your conscience, your sanity. Stop the bombings. I ask that you refuse unlawful orders that violate the Geneva Convention and Nuremberg principles. I ask you to stop the attack on Iran. I thought that was very much needed, and thank you, Anne, so much for once again telling the truth. No wonder you are one of the 270 Americans who tell the truth, done by Robert Shetterly, and you could check it online at americanswhotellthetruth.org. So that's Anne. That's a bit of Anne.
Well, I'm sure that we connected these two topics. The letter to the Pope requesting that he convene urgently a peace conference somewhere with the major leaders of the world, but just as important, speaking out to the billions of people around the world who hopefully will hear his message, and connecting that with Anne's article emphasizing conscience. I see the similarity with the letter you sent. It's an appeal to conscience that there are no more excuses. We're looking at, well, as John Deere said, nonviolence or non-existence. Maybe this will be the time and the opportunity to get rid of all nuclear weapons, and maybe, just maybe, this Pope can make it happen. Jack, I can't thank you enough. It's always so enlightening and inspiring to learn more and more about you and your life and your efforts to bring peace into the world. Take
Well, I
care, my
wouldn't be
friend.
able to bring that into the world if it wasn't for individuals like you, Regis. So thanks for making that possible. It's just a delight to be able to talk to you into many people because again, we're dealing with the most serious issue in human history. I mean, there's no exaggeration there. It's yes, live or not live. That's where we're at.
Again, thank you, Jack. We'll look forward to getting together with you soon. As long as uh, we have power that's predictable, and it's been hard to predict it, and as long as we have internet. We're in a war zone here, and we've been attacked here in Yalta now 3 weeks ago, and several other attempts recently, even just a couple of nights ago, when an unmanned marine vessel was shot down just before it detonated explosives on a very popular beach uh, in the Black Sea here in Yalta that my wife and I frequent on a regular basis. Um, so, anyway,
Yeah.
uh, it's another reason why I really would like to see this effort bring about peace, especially here in Russia, the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Crimea. Be well, my friend. We'll be back in touch.